This podcast may contain discussions of graphic violence, unsettling themes, supernatural phenomena, and other topics that some listeners may find disturbing or triggering. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only. The opinions expressed are simply those of the individual hosts and do not represent the profession of psychology or constitute professional advice. Welcome back to the Secret Passage podcast. I'm Dana Vespoli.
And I'm Shannon.
Oh, Shannon. How are you?
Spending a week with war has been already on my already taxed nervous system has been a little rough.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh yeah. It's been tough for sure. You're just trying to get through the week, and there's a lot of reading, a lot of media to consume on the topic, specifically the Vietnam War and the My Lai massacre is a lot. But before we jump into that, did you happen to venture down any secret passages this week?
Oh God. I mean, it was like full on anxiety disorder, flare, trauma trance this week. Because I was leaving you messages.
Yeah.
Just like feeling, well, when I talked to my consultant, we sort of got to the bottom of it. I couldn't even talk about clinical work this week because I was just so like anxious. And we just talked about being adrenalized, and that helped me so much. Like, just to know that I was just kind of moving through one high adrenaline situation after another and no time for my nervous system to settle. So feeling much better now and looking forward to practicing spending less time on the internet and just really working to try to counter all the opportunities we have to get kind of enervated. Our nervous system's enervated. So yeah, feeling much better, but that was my secret passage. Just like total, I feel like I was in a totally different state for like almost till Thursday this week. And now I'm feeling a little more chill.
Good.
Yeah.
That is good.
Ugh, anxiety sucks. How about you? Did you go down any passages?
Yeah. Let me see. There's a few things. What do I want to talk about? Oh, so the final season of You is out, right? It's on Netflix, and
It's finally over. It's gonna finally end.
yeah, it's done. It's done. The series is done. So I watched that. I enjoyed pretty much. I enjoyed the series, and I know that Penn Badgley in an interview, I want to say around the time after season one, he was talking about how disturbing it was that so many viewers were kind of fetishizing Joe Goldberg, his character, because he plays he as
A good-looking killer.
he's a murderer, yeah. But his thing is that he gets obsessed with a girlfriend and all that kind of stuff, and he's like, I'm like really weirded out. He said this something to the effect of that, like I don't get it, like why, And it's tough because, well, here's the thing. I thought it was pretty clear from season one, that Bex, his girlfriend, didn't deserve to. I'm sorry, guys. Spoilers ahead. Just red alert. Fast forward if you don't want to hear. Bex was, I hesitate to be like, wasn't supposed to die, because none of them were supposed to be murdered. But she just was. He was clear he was a villain, and just he seems, a lot of people sort of perceive him as this sort of anti-hero, like
Yeah.
Dexter's an anti-hero because he's
had
a
a
killer, but he
code.
has a code, right?
Yeah.
He's like the code. He will only kill really horrible people.
And
And
Joe does not have a code.
Joe does not. And what I think season 5 did really well was making it abundantly clear that this man is essentially like a narcissistic psychopath. That he's that this isn't about love for him. That everyone in his life is disposable, and all that kind of stuff. So they did a really good job, and then they kind of thumbed their nose at the viewers in a way that are obsessed with with that we're like really kind of romanticizing him. So I thought that was interesting. I thought they did a good job with that.
Oh, I love it. I'm so glad they did that.
Yeah.
Like turning the mirror on them. Like,
Yeah. It
yeah.
just, I think we had briefly touched on the weird women and men that fall in love with killers in prison.
Yeah, that's so interesting. We should
So
totally do an
interesting.
episode on that.
We should. It's really weird. It's crazy. But anyway, so
Yeah.
that was my secret passage, and neither one of us saw Warfare yet. The movie
Yeah.
Warfare that is still in theaters.
And we were going to, but I was like, my nervous system can't handle this.
I'm like you. The way that I approach movies nowadays is, can I handle this emotionally right
Yeah.
now? And that sounds a little wimpy, maybe, except that I think you and I, we deal with quite a bit. We don't have like this really predictable lifestyles. You
Yeah.
have client lists, and that can change. I have stuff that is not consistent, and there's always work and hustling and shit to do. So it's like whatever we're consuming has to kind of agree with us where we are, right?
Yeah, even Tim, who's like Mr. Chill, was like, "Are we sure we want to watch this? It's gonna like mess up my whole day." And I was
And
like,
it does. Like
"Yeah,
that's I think I told you I follow this creator on TikTok, who goes by Sav or Savvy, and she does movie reviews, and I'm always the way she does them. I tend to usually agree with her take on things, and she saw Warfare and said, amazing movie. I never want to see it again. And
yeah,
about how the sound design, it's a very sort of collaborative experience. Like the audience is going to be shaken by like screams, explosions, all that kind of stuff. It's done in real time, so your adrenaline is going as the movie's going, and yeah, I just
yeah."
couldn't. By the time late afternoon would roll around, I'm like, I can't do it. So, but it is definitely on my list. I want to see it, and it kind of prompted this discussion of when the reactions to the movie, you know, prompted this discussion of war, and specifically the Vietnam War, which was, how would you describe it? It really transformed the way our culture looks at our government, at media, at each other, at trauma, and nothing was the same. Like it actually shifted. We'll never go back. After the experience of the Vietnam War.
It's also the only war I can think of. Well, maybe it's different now. I mean, it was a war that I think people mostly felt like we should not have fought that war.
Yes, yeah,
And
it's yeah,
and like it wasn't a just war, and the
no,
behavior during the war was not just.
no, and the outcome was horrible
Yeah.
for you know
Check out these stats from it, okay? Like 1 in 10 soldiers were injured or killed. And this is just American soldiers. 1 out of 10 soldiers were injured or killed. 2.5 million served. 1/3 of that 2.5 million were drafted. 11,000 women served. I think mostly not in combat roles.
Sure.
The average age was 21, and the average age for World War II was 26. So really young people. And the people at war averaged like 240 days of combat a year, and they were only allowed 5 days of R&R.
Hmm.
58,214 soldiers died, and 1,700 are missing or accounted for. Like huge losses.
Yes.
Those are my
Sorry.
stats.
Poochie just weighed in on his opinion.
He's like, word.
Yeah, he's like, I sat next to my mother during her research, and
I
I get it.
concur.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, let's as we dive in, real quick background on the Vietnam War. Okay. I'm sure most people are decently versed in it, just in case. So after World War II, Vietnam sought independence from French colonial rule, and the country was divided into North Vietnam, communist, and South Vietnam, anti-communist. North Vietnam, led by Ho Chi Minh, wanted to unify the country under communist control. That's a little quick background, and then the reason why we got involved, where it's within the context of the Cold War, we were afraid of the spread of communism, and this known as the domino theory. And we believed if Vietnam fell to communism, another like other Southeast Asian countries would follow, and it would be again domino effect. And so we went in supporting South Vietnam's government against communist North Vietnam, and wanted to prevent Soviet and Chinese communist influence in the region. So, as far as escalation, initially we sent military advisors in the 1950s, and then had an increased military presence in the 1960s under President Kennedy, and then after him, Lyndon Baines Johnson, and then committed ground troops in 1965, escalating into direct military involvement.
Was that after JFK got
Yeah.
assassinated? Yeah.
So the key characteristics are that the war lasted from around 1955 to 1975, and there were things that we were absolutely just not prepared for, like guerrilla warfare tactics by the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, because our troops were prepared for like larger scale attacks, and they were just not prepared for the terrifying tactics, right, of the Viet Cong. Snipers, landmine explosions, people just exploding, the terrain. They were not prepared for the climate and the terrain there in Vietnam, in the jungles. And the war was, it was extremely controversial, and it divided a lot of our country. And it's the first war that we didn't win. So we withdrew troops in 1973, and North Vietnam captured Saigon in 1975, unifying the country under communist rule. And that is the long and short, or the brief overview of the Vietnam War. And what we will mostly be looking at today is the My Lai massacre. And a quick little background on the My Lai massacre. It was an infamous war crime that happened during the Vietnam War on March 16th, 1968, when American soldiers from Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, 11th Brigade, killed between 347 and 504 unarmed Vietnamese civilians in South Vietnam's Son Mai village, which was in the hamlet of My Lai. The massacre was led by Lieutenant William Calley. The victims were mostly women, children, and elderly men. The soldiers went in systematically murdering civilians. Women were raped, homes were burned, animals were killed, and a lot of the victims were killed in groups. There was no resistance. They posed no threat to the soldiers. And this was a moral turning point for us as a country. This completely, I'm not going to say completely, that's because we don't know for sure, but it definitely severely damaged American public support for the Vietnam War, which was already, you know, what's the word?
Not
Yeah,
enthusiastic,
there
mixed.
was, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It really showed in horrifying, grotesque detail the brutality of the conflict. There were images coming out of Vietnam during that time, and lots of questions were raised about military conduct and ethics. And so only Lieutenant Calley was convicted, and he served 3.5 years under house arrest. And this really pointed out inconsistencies in military justice. But yeah, this sparked huge anti-war protests. This influenced the public's perception of military operations, and it became a powerful symbol of the Vietnam War's moral complexity. And this wasn't, of course, this was not the only war crime. It was the most publicized one. Not surprisingly, a lot of war crimes, they try to cover them up. They don't want to. They try to cover them up, and this one was not covered up. Although
Yeah.
it didn't
But
have the outcome that I think a lot of people wanted in terms of adequate punishment.
accountability. Just to plug this book, I'm not even close to being finished with it, but there's a great book called Kill Anything That Moves: The
Yeah,
Real American War in Vietnam. It's by Nick Turse, and the gist of it is that My Lai was not an isolated incident, and that was just commonplace for this kind of thing to happen. And he somehow landed. I had access to this war crimes working group files that started him thinking like, wow, there were just tons of war crimes, and many of them were not investigated, or they were suppressed after they were investigated. I mean, I know other people were charged for other war crimes in
sure.
Vietnam, but it's a good book. And he sort of points to the policy and the procedure that shaped that behavior. That basically they were sort of trained to do what they were doing, and that was a matter of policy and training. And so it's a good read. It's very, very detailed, and he interviews a lot of soldiers who were in Vietnam, and they share their personal accounts. And he sort of pieces together. He goes and interviews people, and he pieces together a lot that otherwise would not have been pieced together.
Yeah. The thing that really comes out, so you and I spoke at length leading up
Yeah.
to this about this documentary that we were both forced to watch in high school U.S. history about the My Lai massacre. And so that was the first time I'd really heard about it. And it it's brutal. There's interviews with soldiers. There's interviews with survivors from the massacre, and the focal point wasn't how does something like this happen, but it shows how
Yeah.
something like this happened, and how unfortunately with war, these things are they are inevitable when
Yeah.
your goal is to make soldiers and make them go in and fight and kill.
Right. I
You
mean,
have to make them
well,
able to be programmed.
right. I mean, you're putting yourself basically as a soldier, you're putting yourself in a situation where your life is on the line. And many of us would not do that. And some people volunteered and some people got drafted. But in those moments, you can't afford to not act. So they basically indoctrinate them into this totally violent culture that dehumanizes the enemy, and then it trains them to kill. And it also has this setup of like punishing them very, very early on. Like it's the carrots and sticks thing. Like there was lots of sticks. Like, you would be punished if you didn't fold your blankets right, or you didn't say sir, yes sir, or you didn't say sir before you addressed someone. And that was training. That's training. And like, if I give you an order, you do what I tell you to do. Otherwise people were afraid they would get shot if they didn't follow orders on the battlefield. So yeah, it's just like total programming. Because you can't have people going out there being like, wait a minute, I have an ethical dilemma with this and I have a choice whether I can pull the trigger. It's like you can't have that if you're making people fight a battle for you, you know?
Yes, and there's also you're accountable to everyone in your group.
Yes, your
You
brotherhood
fuck
thing.
up, it is a brotherhood thing. That's why one person fucks up, everyone pays the price.
Yeah.
That was really rewatching that documentary. It was interesting because it showed them in training, these soldiers in training.
Yeah.
And it shows them, doing cadence, learning how to use their weapons, learning how to use the bayonet, learning how to use all of these things. And one of the things that stood out to me was the way that some of the soldiers spoke about what they did in that village. And where it was really clear was the article you sent me, the Pulitzer prize winning article about going back and looking at everything at My Lai, and the soldiers being asked, like one in particular was asked, like, well, essentially, like, was it hard, was it difficult when you were told to go in and leave no one alive, and he said something to the effect of, no, I was told to do it. Like no, it wasn't after the fact, looking back on it. And I think one of them said, like, I lost my foot 2 days later. It was essentially karma, for lack of a better word. Like, he lost it because of what he did, because ultimately he understood what he did was wrong. But in that moment, he did as he was told, which I know not everyone did. But by and large, the soldiers did as they were instructed.
Well, and also you've got this situation where you cannot distinguish. Well, first of all, the VC were buried within villagers. Like they were,
Yes.
and you didn't know. One guy said something like, everyone looked alike. Like we didn't know who the enemy was. And there were people who were part time, Viet Cong, who were like farmers and who would be part time fighting. And so you can't distinguish who's the enemy. And you go into this village. This quote I loved from that article. So that was like actual reporting from the day, which was really interesting.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so he said there weren't any friendlies in the village. The orders were to shoot anything that moved, another officer said. It could happen to any of us. He's talking about Callie, who got is it Callie? Lieutenant
Callie,
Cal?
who was
Yeah.
charged.
Yeah. So he basically he's defending him. He said it could happen to any of us. He has killed and has seen a lot of killing. Killing becomes nothing in Vietnam. He knew that there were civilians there, but he also knew that there were VC among them. So, like, I think you lose these distinctions. And there was something in the article about Callie and others not initially resisting the order to kill everyone. So I think the orders came from way higher than him, and
No, yeah.
they were just on the ground, and they were told they had to just raise that village, and they did in a barbaric way. When I watched a video of a woman who survived, who said she was in her hiding place and she could see a soldier raping her sister. She didn't know what was going on, and she was too young. And then he killed her right afterwards. So
Right.
there were men just taking women and children and doing things to them and then killing them afterwards. And some people didn't participate, I think.
Right.
And then you think about, like, how does that happen? Right? How does some people objected and some people didn't. And It's just an interesting thing to think about because I know when they came back from the war, a lot of people like armchair quarterbacked it and were like kind of judging. I read a comment someone made in a Reddit thread about the My Lai massacre, and that person was so proud of themselves. I was there, and I never lost my humanity that way. But I don't know. I feel terrible about that because what they did when they did that was not inhuman. I mean, it was awful,
Well,
but it
that
was,
is that
yeah.
that really is
I mean, they
the
lost
the,
their
the
humanity in a sense, but yeah.
it's the thing that stood out to me in researching this, and I feel like there is a sort of through line with all the episodes we do, which is we all of us have the potential for evil, and it is frighteningly easy to become a monster. That all of us, we all have the ability, and the dangerous thing is when we think that we don't.
Oh, I know. And that's so this makes me think about my Pema children. So, like, I'm going to read a quote from what she said, and I firmly believe this. War and peace start in the hearts of individuals. War begins when we harden our hearts, and we harden them easily, in minor ways and then in quite serious major ways, such as hatred or prejudice, whenever we feel uncomfortable. It's so sad, really, because our motivation in hardening our hearts is to find some kind of ease, some kind of freedom from the distress that we're feeling. And then she goes on to say, someone once gave me a poem with a line in it that offers a good definition of peace, softening what is rigid in our hearts. We can talk about ending war and we can march for ending war. We can do everything in our power, but war is never going to end as long as our hearts are hardened against each other. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a very simple way of looking at like what happens for us when we see someone as an enemy. And we all have the capacity to lose our humanity. I mean, I do every day. If somebody cuts me off or drives like a maniac, I harden my heart and I get very angry and I feel very warlike.
Well, we harden our hearts as a way to survive.
Yeah.
Imagine if we were vulnerable, like open, every step of the way in every situation, that we couldn't survive the homelessness that we see on the streets. We couldn't survive the injustices that we know are happening all around us. It's you said, I think in we were sending voice memos back and forth this morning, and you said something about like you want to see a sociopath go into any major city,
Right. Like,
and how you get through life in a city like San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York City, and how you survive
right. I mean,
seeing all of that, and needing to get from home to work. You have a job to do at work. You got kids to feed at home. You have things that you got to turn in your reports at work, this, that, and the other, and you pass by pain and suffering every fucking day. We just put our blinders on.
and it's interesting that, so I told you this morning in my message. I've always heard that there's this research that points to our circles as humans, like our tribes. So there's this anthropologist. So I had to look it up finally because I always quote it or I always mention it and I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm talking about. So, but basically, Robin Dunbar is a British anthropologist who did research on primate groups and social group sizes in primates and humans. So Robin Dunbar came up with, it's called Dunbar's number, and it's a suggested cognitive limit to the number of people with whom we can maintain stable social relationships, and it's based on our neocortex. And so the number hovers around 150. So basically, it's like a common figure that we reference for how many meaningful close relationships we can have in a social network, which I thought was really interesting. And it you know I know it's different now with like social media. Our circles are kind of getting bigger, and this is not like a hard and fast number, but basically he related it to our neocortex size and things that he observed in primate groups and in our groups. But that tends to relate to empathy and how much empathy we can have and for whom. And what I thought was really interesting is that, like, it's due to kind of like cognitive constraints, right? Like, we prioritize the people closest to us, like family and friends, because we have emotional bonds and familiarity. And in extending empathy to strangers or large groups, we do this thing called psychic numbing, where we basically get kind of like compassion fatigue. If we hear about one person who had a tragedy, we often feel a lot of empathy. But if, as the scope and the scale of a tragedy goes up, the empathy is harder for us to have, which I think is so interesting in relationship to this, right? Like the men at war. I mean, of course, we can work on it, like Pema Chodron and all of her work and all of the practices I do. And I think probably in church, like with Christianity, you basically practice learning to open to have a more broad, expanded group that you feel compassion and empathy for. But it's work. It takes a lot of effort for us as we scale up to feel, like if I felt for every single homeless person that I saw on the streets, I would just spend all of my time being like in pain,
Right.
right?
Just in your bed, not getting out of bed, just, yeah, hiding under the covers. Yeah.
But it's so interesting because you have like these groups of men, they have their brotherhood, they're fighting together, they're bonded together, they're watching their fellow brothers be killed by this quote unquote enemy. And especially when the enemy is situated in groups of villagers, and right,
Right.
it makes sense that they would want, have an impulse to punish and to get revenge, and B, not be able to empathize because they're threatened by them. And whenever we're threatened by something, we very much lose like touch with our humanity and right. And they're given guns and they're given orders. It's just like no surprise to me. It's awful, but it's no surprise.
It's no surprise. I mean, that, yeah, we're talking about a group of people, some of which had never seen the outside of whatever town they grew up in. They're young, and they're dropped in the middle of a place. They're trained for higher kind of scale combat, which means a little more distance. And they're not prepared. They're not prepared for the terrain. They're not prepared for what the Viet Cong was doing, which was sniper attacks, landmines, bombs attached to little kids and sent into them. The cells working within this very, very foreign place, within these villages. They're not sleeping.
Yeah.
I think just prior to the My Lai massacre, I forgot how like a huge number of men were just blown up.
Yeah.
So now they're paranoid, they're panicked, they're angry, they're scared, they're not sleeping, and they're high as fuck on speed. A lot of them.
Not a good
That
combo.
was government sanctioned dexedrine given to the soldiers to keep them awake, which means they're going to be paranoid. You and I both have known people on speed, meth, all that
I thought you
shit.
were going to say you and I. Well, I've done speed, and I have never to the extent that I like went bonkers. But you hear about like the stabby murders, and most of them are speed related.
Yeah. No,
Like,
and I've had. I mean, I remember like someone very close to me, like when she has been in active addiction, she becomes someone else,
yes.
unrecognizable,
Yeah.
a monster.
Yeah.
So, you put someone in that situation, and then you hand them a gun
And
and
order
essentially
them.
tell them, "There's fucking Viet Cong in that village. Go." And you just
Yeah.
start killing. And again, this is not like to excuse what happened, which is fucking horrible in these people. Like I think about these people like what was it? It was morning time. They'd finished breakfast. You've got little kids, you've got
Oh my
you've got
God,
moms,
I
you've got
know.
old men, and the fact that they just were shaking and afraid and just destroyed.
And lined up and lined up and killed. That story about the woman who was in a pile of bodies, still alive, with her children and her mother dead on top of her. Just broke my heart. But that again, it's like this is what happens for us. I mean, think about it. Like everybody has an experience of getting super angry with someone. You don't have access in that moment to your thinking in the same way you do like when you're not in that state, especially not in a state of constant fear. I mean, being in constant fear too is you're not in the place to consider really. And that's by design. I mean, that's our evolution, really. Like,
Right.
fight or flight. And that's how we continued to live as a species because we didn't stop and think, oh, is that a saber-toothed tiger? I mean, what should I do? Like, should I just like sit here or, I mean, we just like ran or you fought or you played
Froze.
dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what these men did.
Yeah.
Most of them fought. Some of them froze, and when they did, other soldiers came in and did the job for them.
Yeah.
And some of them fled.
Yeah.
Not very many, though, because they also were going to face consequences.
I can't imagine. I have so much empathy for these people after doing this week of research. I cannot imagine signing up or being drafted would be the worst.
Yeah.
Right? There's something so wrong, I feel like, about applying your standards as a person who's comfortable in their home in the United States, not on the war field, not having gone through that training, not scared for your life, not, to say, "Oh, these people are so wrong." I mean, I don't know. It's like the accountability issue is a big question mark for me. I'm like, are you put them in this situation where they don't have a choice really. I mean, sure, maybe they could have abstained, refrained, whatever, but they get caught up in this thing that they're in, which is also very human, and they do what you told them to do, and then you want to put them in prison. Like, I think a lot of people really questioned that. Like, and I feel. And just on the legal stuff to me, I don't know. I don't know what we do about that. But the psychological piece, if I put myself in the position of somebody who went over there and found myself doing something that I find morally reprehensible and have a very hard time living with and forgiving myself for, if I come back and then all these people are kind of sitting back and judging my behavior based on like their regulated nervous systems, their, you know what I mean? Not
Right.
understanding the pressures in that moment, and I would feel so alone, and I would feel so enraged just about the whole entire thing that I had to do that I had to be there and do that. And then not only that, I come back and people look at me like I'm a monster. And I just thought that for some reason
While
I
you're
had to.
dealing with PTSD.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
dealing with the fact that, like, wow, I did these things that I cannot believe I'm capable of doing. Like, my grandfather, he had a third grade education. He left with his father to go out on the road to find work because they were really poor and they didn't have money. And his mother and father had split up. And he ended up going into the war, World War II, when he was 16 because he just had no other options. And his mom signed a paperwork that lied about his age, and he was able to join the Marines. And when he was a Marine, his unit had been in a battle with some Japanese soldiers, and there were like 16 wounded Japanese soldiers who were just going to die, like bleed out, or and his superior officer ordered him to basically slit their throats, and he had to slit the throats of 16 Japanese soldiers when he was like 16 years old. And, the impact of war is immeasurable, I think, in terms of like what it does to the individual, but then what it does to their families and
Right.
our culture. When they come back and they don't get adequate care, they don't get understanding, like they don't get welcomed back into the fold. Anyway, it's just terribly sad to me that we put people through this.
We do, and then also, again, to the point that what's frightening about something like this is how easy it is for something like this to happen. And it made me think of, you remember the Stanford prison experiment?
Yes.
So for those of you who are not familiar or need a quick refresher, the Stanford experiment was a very controversial psychological study that was conducted in 1971 by Stanford University psychology professor Philip Zimbardo. And so, like, the key details are, it was the design of it was 24 male college students were randomly assigned roles as prisoners or guards, and it took place in a simulated prison environment in Stanford Psychology Building.
Mm-hmm.
And it was supposed to last 2 weeks, but it was terminated after 6 days. And what the observations were from this experiment were that the guards quickly became abusive and authoritarian. The prisoners became passive and displayed signs of extreme stress. The participants rapidly internalized their assigned roles. And the psychological transformations happened like shockingly quickly. Some of the guards exhibited sadistic behaviors, and the prisoners experienced emotional breakdowns and depression. So, this obviously this experiment was criticized for how unethical the research practice was.
Yeah, this is the other part. So I think it totally points to something real. But now all these people are coming out and saying like, oh, well, I was a theater kid and I kind of was overplaying it when I was
Sure,
playing the prison guard. And then other people are saying that he was like his research methods, they criticized them because
sure.
he was like spinning a story. But also I think it's real. I mean, we see it all the time. Like when people get promotions at work and they start acting different when they become the boss or.
Sure. I mean, so yeah, the point is too, you see it on like a more palatable scale, right? You've got students at one of the most prestigious universities in the United States falling apart. You see just, yeah, like you said, when people get promotions, when people's status or roles change, and how they can go through this sort of shift.
God, when my friend and I were cheerleaders in seventh and eighth grade, and it's so funny. I felt my own authoritarianism come online. We became coaches for the younger girls. Briefly, we became coaches for the younger girls squad, and we were so tough. We were like, you can't miss any practices. And we were just totally, and I felt myself getting a little bit like, I was young, but I felt myself really kind of clamping down in this way that is authoritarian.
Yeah, look at college fraternities, dude.
Oh God, yeah, the hazing.
The hazing. Look at fucking John Hamm. Have you seen that? Like it was coming out about John Hamm when he was in his college fraternity, and he was like directly involved in like the torture of this one pledge, and the guy ended up with like, I want to say, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, guys. He ended up with some like essentially like a physical disability because of it.
Ooh, I did not know this.
Like he was hurt really, really fucking badly
Oh
because he
my
was just
God.
being the shit was being beaten out of him.
Oh my God, I was still mean to my sister when I was a kid.
Sure. Still to this day, I'll never, I can't forget. I told you about when I was in first grade, right?
No.
So when I was in first grade, I went to first grade in Grable, Wyoming. So this is a small town in fucking Wyoming in the fucking 1970s.
Hmm.
I was a little brown kid in a very white town in the fucking 70s in a public school. And like I would go to school. I was, because I was living with my grandparents at the time. My mom was going through some issues. And so I was like deposited with my grandparents for that year. And I was like called nigger at school
Oh.
because kids, they saw dark, and they couldn't conceptualize that I was Asian. Anything that was, when you were othered, so that the color of my skin, this is what I am. This is who I am.
Hmm.
And there was a little girl in my class And she, looking back on it, as an adult looking back on it, this was a little girl that was dealing with suffering from a lot of neglect. She didn't talk very much. She would come to school very ratty. But at the time, I was so desperate to belong. I was so desperate to not be this gross, ugly, worthless little person that they kind of pulled me in to their group to basically pick on her and make fun of her for her how her hair was always tangled and how she was always dirty. And I joined right in. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
good, it's not me today.
Yes.
And I joined in. And I made fun of her to her face. I picked on her. And it was just a day when I wasn't going to get abused.
Totally.
And I'll never forget, because later on in PE, the PE teacher, so it's like first grade, so we're doing like crab walks across the fucking gym. The weird exercises they would
Crab
have you do.
walks.
Crab walking across the floor. I look over, and she's sitting on a bench, and the PE teacher, who was this kind woman, was brushing her hair, trying to brush her hair.
Oh my God.
And I think back on that, and I have a lot. I mean, obviously, I wonder whatever happened to her, and I'm so mad at myself, but I also feel like I want to hug the both of us. I'd like to go back in time and hug us both.
Totally.
Because neither of us deserved what happened, but I also wished that, like, that I could have been the person that's like, well, then you're picking on the both of us, because,
Oh God, that brings us to that. Yeah, no. I mean, you were in survival mode too.
that's
Yeah,
exactly it. It's like, well, better her than me,
totally.
you
I
know?
mean, it's so hard to forgive ourselves for that, but it really is. You don't have the tools at that age. No one was teaching me how to navigate that
No.
landscape. And, I did the whole like, just be accommodating, be funny, be nice, just to survive. I mean, I remember white knuckling it through all of that politics, all of that. I mean, girls at my school, ooh, this one woman, she became a psychologist. Of course. She was beautiful, and she came to our school in like sixth grade. And she was beautiful, so that's one count against her, unless, she could find, people to, that was not an asset. She was a threat or something. I don't know. She was not very skillful socially. I remember one time we hung out and like, she had her sights set on being cool. And I remember she was staying the night at my house and we were making cupcakes and like eating cupcakes, very innocent, good fun. And my other friends were out like sneaking out and they were calling us. They're like, we're going to go sneak out and go to Donnie McNeil's house. Like, and I was like, no, I'm not ready. I still want to play with Barbies basically. But like she was at my house and she said something like, oh my God, I can't believe they're like sneaking out with boys and I'm just sitting here eating cupcakes. And I was like, bitch. And then she got hers because like she ended, everybody turned against her. It was so awful. Everybody turns against her. People went to her house. First of all, no one would eat with her. People followed her home one day. All the tough girls were following her home. There was a stream of like 100 people menacingly following her home. And then some people went to her house when no one was there and they put a sprinkler in her house and turned it on.
So wait, so they essentially broke into her house.
Oh yeah. And then she ended up leaving the school. But now she's a psychologist and I don't blame her. But like the shit we do to each other, over envy, over I don't know, competition. Ugh.
And as a way to, again, survive, because when you're a kid, I mean, your scope is so narrow.
Oh yeah.
This is your whole world.
Yeah.
And I think back on it, and I never told anyone. Like, I didn't tell my grandparents. I think I was ashamed of myself.
Yeah.
I thought it was me. Also, because I would get chased home crying. Like, dude,
Oh.
how the fuck did I? No wonder I ended up in porn. Like, no
I'm
wonder.
so sad for you.
Well, it's okay. It's one of the things when I laugh about, like, Gen Xers are like, we are just
I
built
know.
fucking different, man. We had to be like 30 at the age of 10. You know what I mean? Like it just, I remember that like when I wasn't getting called all kinds of racial epithets in school, and this is first grade,
Oh,
and how about I had to walk to school by myself and back home, and I was 6 years old.
oh,
This town had drive-through liquor stores. Like
that's
this is,
hilarious.
yeah. But I knew that when the bell rang and it was time to go home, where I'd be walking home by myself, I was going to be chased by boys on bikes yelling at
Oh,
me.
oh my God.
And so, like, I was a wreck, but I didn't tell my fucking grandparents about it. Like, I just
Yeah.
would go home and I just zipped it. I will say that life got a little easier as school year went on, right? Things
Mm-hmm.
got a little easier. People got used to me, right? They got used to me, and yeah, occasionally I'd get like the mean racial epithet, sometimes from other kids' parents or whatever,
Oh,
but it wasn't a constant, right?
jeez.
So then after that year, I moved to Oregon, and that was a whole other thing, because now
Yeah.
it's a small town in Oregon, same thing, different place. But yeah, it's you see it early, just that like people's capacity for cruelty. It's their way of coping with something that's foreign to them, that's different to them, that's alien to them. And then we have our methods of surviving, whether it's joining in when we can to like take the pressure off of us, or is like in your case as a way to just to not be the other one, to not be the one that's getting made fun of or picked on or seems different.
I tried to be Switzerland. I was like, I didn't go along, but I also didn't like stand up. And like this brings us to the conversation we've been having over and over again about all the how people this bugs the shit out of me when people are like think they take themselves to be, I would be the person who hid Anne Frank in my
And her
attic.
family, yeah,
Right.
and
No, you
9 times out
wouldn't.
of 10 you're gonna fucking be turning people in.
I look at COVID and I'm like, okay, first of all, I was working at Facebook as a therapist during COVID. And I remember I had clients from Wuhan and they were talking about this weird virus and they couldn't go home. And then it finally hit us. And I remember immediately in the medical center, people started stealing PPE and like hand sanitizer and like all the people online who were buying all the toilet paper and,
And the hand
selling.
sanitizer for like thousands of dollars.
Yes, and like yeah, right, people. Like people who think that they're going to respond to something like that with open hearts and open minds and kindness and like community thinking and it's like right, all that goes right out the window.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking of. Again, you see how frighteningly easy it is to be controlled, to be programmed. You
Oh,
know, these soldiers are programmed to kill, they're programmed to destroy. And then if you look at our response during COVID, how easy it was for us to just blindly go along with what we're being told. And in some cases, yeah, steal from others, withhold from others,
hate
attack others.
hate your family members because
Right.
they wouldn't wear a mask or whatever. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
There's so many things, as my children are moving closer to adulthood, and my oldest is 18 now. And he has this amazing high school teacher that's his just loves this guy. This guy's amazing. And Mr. Pickett, the teachers, talking to the class about, when you become an adult, like this is it, man. That essentially the wonderful thing about being an adult is there is a sense of freedom, right? You're making choices for yourself, you all this kind of thing. And so one of the things that I tell my oldest is just the hard thing. Like when I was little, I remember thinking, when I'm a grown up, I'm gonna have all the answers. Like everything, you just sort of become a grown up, and you automatically you know right from wrong, how to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And and that was the thing with COVID. I mean, a lot of things besides COVID. Holy shit! Like even fucking today, there's shit. I'm like, wow, I have like so many deficits in my learning. Like I'm still don't understand certain things.
No, I
But
know. Same
COVID
here.
really was so hard, because I'm like, I don't know what to believe.
Yeah.
Like I have, my instincts are telling me one thing, but if those are wrong, we're all gonna die.
Yeah, yeah, no. I
Right?
mean, they scared the shit out of us.
Yeah, which again, to bring all of this sort of back into this idea about like, how are monsters created? How did My Lai happen? How does anyone end up doing something horrible? And the idea is it's real easy. It's frighteningly easy to, when you realize, again, it's not everyone, but by and large, most of us are heavily influenced. It's not hard to control a group of people. It's not hard to manipulate a group of people. And I mean, we look at just cults. We look at the kind of cult mentality of things, of tribalism, of using fear as a means to control and manipulate a group of people,
Yeah.
and that's essentially it. It's
We
I
see that
think
with our
regardless,
politics.
yeah, regardless of which side you're on, and again, talking about tribalism, Democrat, Republican, left, right, regardless of which side you're on, we can all see how vulnerable we are to tactics of manipulation and control.
Yeah, it's a bigger cognitive challenge, and it's a bigger cognitive load to be heterodox, like to have heterodox views. It's
Right.
easy, it's way easier cognitively and I think emotionally to fall into a very extreme camp, or like to us them, to be dichotomous in your thought, and right,
And
and it's
yeah, and we are a social species. We want to be in a community. We want to know that there are others that think like we do. And sometimes we inadvertently find ourselves, molding and shaping ourselves to fit into to to a thought process, to belong to a certain community that we see as virtuous.
and you feel okay, so certainty, right? Like uncertainty is totally aversive, and that's for good reason. Like the people that survived, like in terms of our evolution, were people that were highly pessimistic and highly anxious. Like there's that question all the time, or this thing in ACT where we talk about like it's better to miss lunch than to be lunch. But so like, so like if you're an early human, and you're looking out across the savannah and you see something that, this is an example that's used often, but like you look out in the distance and you see this thing and you're like, is that a berry bush or is that a saber-toothed tiger? I don't know. And the people that were like a little less anxious would approach it without
Sure.
knowing what it was. The people who are a little more anxious would say, I'm hungry, but I'm not going to go there because I
Not
don't know
worth
what that
it.
is.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's how we operate. Like we especially like with war, if you think about it, right? Like the guy who was talking about My Lai, how he said a woman was approaching him and he got the order to fire, and he's like, I don't know what she was carrying. Then I thought maybe she's carrying a bomb, and I fired, and she was carrying a baby. But like in that moment, if you are a person who has self-preservation instincts, if there's this ambiguous situation plus the added bonus of having someone tell you to actually fire, give you an order, you're probably going to fire
Yeah.
out of fear, out of compliance, out of whatever, survival. Because if you don't comply, you run the risk of being shot or punished. It's wild.
Yeah, it's interesting. So looking at, trying to answer the question, like,
Oh yeah.
how are monsters made? If we think of the soldiers, that committed the My Lai massacre, it reminded me of, remember, Abu Ghraib, and
Yeah.
the prisoners during, I think, early on in the Iraq War, and what the prison guards were doing to the prisoners, and the outcome of that. One of the people, I found her especially interesting because she was sort of like this. She was a soldier, Lindy England, and she's the one that saw in the pictures, doing the thumbs up, like while these prisoners are being tortured and humiliated and all that kind of thing. And she was asked about it later. She did her time, and later on she was asked about it, and I have this quote from her. So in 2012, following her release, she stated that she did not regret her actions. The Iraqis' lives are better. They got the better end of the deal, she said. They weren't innocent. They're trying to kill us, and you want me to apologize to them? It's like saying sorry to the enemy.
Mm.
And you see that. Like, that's.
Mm-hmm.
That's there's so much of that, you know.
Yeah.
So I think about like I mean, already, I mean, if we talk about like the legacy of the Vietnam War, and with the outcome is just you had a nation of people here just disillusioned.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's a mistake to say that the overwhelming feeling is we didn't belong there. The U.S. didn't belong there.
No, and then you have like the legacy of trauma and what that does to a culture. I mean, and the numbers, the families that were impacted. Um, and yeah, I think people really felt the full cost of war. I mean, I know they felt it before, but I think that World War II, they came back sort of
Heroes.
heroes and they got that. That I feel like an incredible amount of shame was placed on the heads of these soldiers who were basically tools of the politicians. There's a great quote that I found. Oh, I don't think I can find it.
You told me yesterday it was something to the effect of like if you want to blame anyone, then you blame the politicians, that the soldiers were essentially like collateral damage.
Yeah, in the military. And I think that's why things like the just war theory and those things that try to sort of have some standards around conduct and why and how we and why we go to war, that exists because like these are real people's lives and you don't want some, well, I mean, God, how many wars have we been in over the last, so many.
Yeah.
You want somebody, well, they killed JFK. So, but
Yeah.
you hope that you have an administration and leadership that isn't corrupt, isn't driven by corruption, and that there's. But yeah, I think that is the going. My parents both said, when I asked them yesterday, that they both said we shouldn't have been there, and my dad was there. He was a military policeman in Da Nang, but you know, we shouldn't have been there, and that's the saddest part too for these people and all the damage that it wreaked on their lives. For what?
Yeah, that was a war. I think like there were just images just flooding out of Vietnam, like with photojournalism,
Yes.
that really showed us, the citizens, what was happening,
Yes.
and it had a fundamental impact on media.
Yeah.
And I know that we talked about Susan Sontag's books, on photography and regarding the pain of others when we were discussing like kind of our relationship to pain. And this certainly applies because she talks at length about the Vietnam War and images, and that images do two things. I mean, it's a long essay, but just kind of the general kind of what I got out of it with regard to this is that images, they do two things. One is they can provoke empathy, but equally they can desensitize you. And I think about that now, just with this oversaturation and this kind of deadening, and it's just a general deadening. It's we are so overly stimulated that it's like that experiment, that horrible experiment done with cats, where they just like the electrocution, and then at the end, the cat's just laying there, just taking it, just like not like having shut down, and we shut down,
Yeah.
and
And
we look at stuff, and especially coming out of Vietnam, it also changed kind of. It had a huge effect on the horror genre, and you had talked about Wes Craven. Well, the Last House on the Left, he has said, was influenced quite a bit by the horrors coming out of Vietnam, and horror movies started to show monsters as being just everyday people, and the gore was much more excessive, and all this kind of stuff, which of course goes far into deadening our responses a little bit. That this sort of jaded, there's like a jaded response, and also Susan Sontag talks about it. It's like when does it start to become entertainment, right? these images. And it reminded me of, one, I think I left you a voice memo. I was talking about, I'll never forget after 9/11. I think I went on the Drudge Report online and there was a link,
Mm-hmm.
and the link was to Daniel Pearl's beheading.
Yes, I saw it too.
Yeah, and I can't I can't get it out of my head, and it's very upsetting. But also, these websites like Ogrish and all these other things. I don't know if Ogrish is even around anymore, but you can go and you can look at people dying or crime scene footage. Just terrible things. And why are we looking at this stuff? Why do we want to? I mean, I understand morbid curiosity. I get it, but what happens when we're consuming so much of that?
Yeah, I have some thoughts about that.
Okay.
Well, so it's interesting. Like when 9/11 happened, I was totally numbed out to it. And I remember my friend watching, couldn't stop watching it. But I was like, didn't watch anything about 9/11 until like years and years and years later. I watched the little bits on TV and was thought that was a really odd thing that I did not feel overwhelmed by it or obsessed with it. Because, there are things that I have felt overwhelmed and obsessed with and tragedies. That Wes Craven piece, I read that it was a commentary on societal desensitization, and that he had kind of been inspired by the juxtaposition of these images that were coming back from Vietnam and then like the advertisements that would pop up about like sort of mundane things. And that we were kind of, our numbness to real world violence was growing. And so again, I go back to that thing we were talking about earlier about the psychic numbing that happens and our cognitive capacity to sort of like feel empathy or to feel, I don't know, like as the tragedies scale up, our empathy, it takes more effort to have empathy, which brings me to this, like with Pema Chodron, part of the teachings are like one of her teachers actually uses this memory he has of watching these boys stone a puppy to death.
Sure.
And he uses that image as a way to open his heart to suffering of all beings, all sentient beings. And I can see how that is part of it, like our obsession with true crime, our obsession. There is an empathy piece and a heart opening piece and a bearing witness piece. And, right?
Yes. And I have to go back to this idea that like when we talk about these things and the numbing and of course the jadedness and stuff, it's I get it, because to empathize is painful,
Yeah.
right? And I understand the need to survive and to it's you don't want to hurt.
It's
We
not,
do everything in our power to not feel any discomfort.
yes. And it's not evolutionary. Like, it doesn't make sense for us as beings. Like, we couldn't function if we didn't have some capacity to numb. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But right, you're right. Like we do avoid. Part of me is like look away, but also like don't look away. Like you need to see this. And so like to tolerate that discomfort and pain, to observe and bear witness to these things feels important to me on some level.
It's very important. I think the key is to then to try and figure out what to do with that. What to do
Yeah.
with those feelings.
Yeah.
Which again is so much of you do your work with with Pemba Chodron, and I do mine with my faith journey and my Christianity, and I appreciate what I love about my church community is they provide opportunities to take those feelings and to do something.
Yes.
And it doesn't, you don't have to belong to a church, or you don't have to, practice a faith necessarily. Although I think it's wonderful too, to find ways, and they can be small ways.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be. Sometimes it's just looking somebody in the eye and genuinely asking them how they're doing, or helping someone that needs help,
Mm-hmm.
crossing a street or opening a door, or offering any kind of a kind word, paying someone a compliment. Sometimes it's like the only nice thing they're gonna fucking hear that day.
Yes, to be of service. It's interesting. A lot of the work in like with Pema's teachings and in Buddhism, like a lot of the work is like to stop the like navel gazing, like to stop thinking about like and to look out into the world and to like to be of service, to care about your fellow human being. And I think that's actually the kind of the answer is like recognizing that we do shut our hearts down and we do shut ourselves off to people and we do get very selfish and whatever it is, and to really build the practice and capacity of your heart to hold more. And that's what you do at church.
Yeah. And I think about these soldiers, and not just the ones from Vietnam, not just the ones you know in the My Lai massacre, but I think about it, and it's like they're there, but for the grace of God, go I. I
Yeah.
don't know what I would do if I was a young man, you know, training for war, and someone hands me a gun and says, "Go do this," after I've been programmed
Yeah.
to kill, and I've watched my friends that have become my family in this very foreign place die, suffer, screaming, and then just the screaming of the victims, like
Yeah.
these men, women, and children in these villages, and just the sound of screaming, and you're just dealing with abject terror,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have somebody saying, "Shoot."
Yeah.
I don't know what I'd do. I'd like to think that I would be like, "Hey, this is bad. Like, no, I won't. I won't. This is just fundamentally wrong. I'd love that. I don't think it's likely.
Yeah.
And
One
I don't think
guy.
that makes me a bad person. It's just I'm a flawed, broken human fucking being, you know. And I'm grateful that I'm not there. I wasn't there. You're not there. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
Like
I know. That's
like
why I can't. That's why I think the draft is actually is morally reprehensible. Like you cannot draft people for this. Like
yeah.
you have people have to go. I mean, even when you decide you want to do it, though, it's like you don't really know what you're getting into. I think until you get there. But yeah, I know it's yeah, that's why the armchair quarterbacking stuff just bothers me so much. It's
Yeah.
like who does that serve? Like you have to feel so good about yourself that you don't see that you are also someone who is vulnerable to those forces. And there were people who said no. Like there's a guy who said he wouldn't do it, and then Callie picked up the gun and then they gunned all these people down when he said no. It's like I think some people did say no, and it's just like that's just a matter of your history and like your learning and your ability to sort of your choices, right? Like maybe you went along with teasing that girl, but I might not have gone along with teasing that girl, but I might have spent a lot of time finding ways to get out of the situation and not engage. That was my whole MO. I'm like, how can I not do harm but how also not get called out for not joining? And it was this weird dance I had to do of like, but I participated sometimes in the cruelty too.
Sure.
But like, I'm sure there were people just like shooting into the woods or shooting away from people to look like they were shooting.
Sure. No, and that is the thing. Of course there are some remarkable people, just like the people that did all they could to protect Anne Frank and her family.
Yeah.
But I think the key is the way that we prevent ourselves from becoming monsters is to recognize how easy it is to become one,
Right. To
and to
know.
humble yourself,
Yeah.
and it's like, I don't know.
I agree.
It's interesting. I wanted to say real quick, when you mentioned Callie, did you see it was in that Pulitzer that article. It's fun. I was at a soccer game yesterday reading it. I'm like sitting in the chair. My kids are out on the field, and I'm like reading
Reading
this
about
stuff. I'm
war.
like, because we had such a short period of time to prepare for this. But like Callie, despite everything, it talked about him like just sort of having these like his whole identity was military.
Yeah.
He was very into being, and I know he was a higher ranking soldier, but like he was about that life, and even despite everything and being, it's a lot of people would say he didn't do enough time for the war crimes, but he's all into it, you know.
Yeah, and what he said was, I valued my troops' lives more than my enemy.
Right. And
And
that's how you fucking survive,
right.
you know.
Yeah.
I think about those villagers too, and it's like they suffered, they died, but man, it's
There's a dog party going on back there.
I know, I'm so sorry. Bruno and Poochie were just going at it. Yeah, the whole thing is just so awful, and I'm trying to find a way for us to end on like a note that is not just ah.
I know. Well, I think we've been really gotten somewhere with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, except that we do that a lot. Like, it's another way of like separating things, right? I'm good, they're flawed.
Yeah.
I would never have done such a thing. Putting the badness in someone else and not, that's dangerous because we're vulnerable to closing our hearts all the time.
Right. It's true. It's true. Guys, I hope that you are okay. If you stuck with us this whole time, thank you. Yeah, this was a tough one. This was a tough, like the Gabriel Fernandez episode. This was a really tough one. But I feel like you and I are just always we've both always been really interested in understanding what it is to be human, warts and all. And
Mm.
why we do the things we do, how things happen, and how we can prevent those things from happening, moving forward.
You nailed that. So I'm going to read this.
Okay.
Okay, this is like what the presenter said at the end of that documentary. So the documentary we keep talking about is 4 Hours in My Lai,
Right.
Anatomy of a Massacre, and I will link to it in the show notes. But the presenter at the end said, the My Lai massacre was carried out by ordinary American youngsters whose average age was 20. They'd been only 7 weeks in Vietnam. It didn't take long to change them from supposedly civilized to barbarians. Only some months of military training and the pressures of war. The training hasn't changed perceptibly. Given another war, it could all happen again. Which I thought
And it has.
yeah.
It has. And that is the thing. It's just as far as war crimes, it is inevitable. I don't see how they don't happen
Yeah.
and
They
how we
probably
aren't driven mad.
yeah.
But there was this thing. I was on TikTok this morning, and there was a post, and it was, "What's your DTF?" And I was like, "DTF? Doesn't that stand for down to fuck? What?" And it was, "What is the D is what is your favorite drink?
Oh,
T, what is the T-shirt you're wearing right now? And then F, what is the next film you plan on watching?"
okay.
So just to end on a totally fluffy note, Shannon, what's your DTF?
Okay, what was the D again?
Drink of choice.
My drink of choice. Ooh, you know what I like?
What?
I like jasmine green tea with a little bit of honey, or peppermint tea with honey.
Ah, yeah.
How about you? Oh, and then my t-shirt that I'm wearing is
Yeah.
just my workout shirt. It's full of microplastics. I'm on the hunt for like that PFAS free clothing, but I haven't really found anything I want. Anyways, there's that. And then what's the other one? Oh,
Film.
next film. Ooh, 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 ooh. Oh, I think I will see Warfare.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you?
My drink of choice is I don't want to say coffee. It's the thing I look forward to drinking the most. And then of course I always drink my jug of water and I have to put in like I also like the noon hydration
So good.
things. But my favorite coffee beverage, I like a good latte with vanilla.
Yes.
The t-shirt I'm wearing is my pink Sabrina Carpenter t-shirt. It's so funny. I like you
She's
know me. I
pretty.
she looks like a doll, like a Barbie. Like she's very cute. I have such a fondness for Sabrina Carpenter. I She's really good driving music. When I'm just driving and I her music it's very 80s sounding to me. The 80s like pop music.
Hmm.
I like her voice and she's fun when I'm not listening to rock and roll or whatever. And then the next film, I Warfare also for me. If I can just kind of recover from this episode we did, I do want to see Warfare.
I also want to see the Jenny Penn movie.
What's the Jenny Penn movie?
Jenny Penn is the one with John Lithgow, and he has that weird doll. The something of Jenny Penn. It's a horror movie.
Okay, yeah, I'm down to see that as well. I'll have to look up the trailer for that. Oh, dude. Okay, I know the movie I really want to see.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish it was out already. Weapons. Did you see the trailer for that?
No.
Oh, I'm gonna send it to you. It's the by the same person who did Barbarian.
Ooh, yes, yes, yes. Oh, yes. Somebody sent me that.
With the kids and they're like at two something in the morning, they run outside the house and they just start running.
Yeah, I didn't even watch it.
Okay, yeah, no, it's one film critic guy that I watch on TikTok. He always does really good kind of analyses of movies, and he mentioned something about like it seems almost like a modern retelling of the Pied Piper of Hamlin.
Ooh.
But yeah, that's when I see the trailer, I'm like, oh, I want to see it. I really want
Okay.
to see it.
I'm looking
Yeah.
it up when we get off.
All right, gang.
Thanks to
Thank
all
you.
of our new followers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate you and appreciate when you give us 5-star reviews, when you give us feedback, talk to us, all that kind of stuff. We love it. We appreciate it. We really enjoy having, a community that we can kind of talk about things with.
Yeah, so follow us on Instagram if you haven't already at Secret Passage Podcast, and then on X at Secret Pass Pod.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.